My name is Alina Carter, and I was 27 years old the night my parents tried to throw me out of the house I secretly owned. But to understand how everything fell apart, you need to go back to the moment I turned 18. Because that was the night they made it very clear I was never really their daughter. I still remember the smell of the cake. Vanilla with cheap frosting, store-bought of course. My mother never baked for me, not once in my entire life. But appearances mattered to her. Always. Smile, Alina, she whispered sharply, her hand gripping my arm just a little too tight. Your aunt is watching. So I smiled, because that's what I had always done. I smiled when my younger brother got a car for his 16th birthday, while I got a used notebook and a lecture about earning things in life. I smiled when my parents skipped my graduation ceremony but showed up front row for his football practice. I smiled when they turned my bedroom into his gaming lounge and moved me into the basement. I smiled through everything, because I thought if I just held on a little longer they might finally love me. I was wrong. That night after the guests left and the fake smiles faded, my father called me into the living room. He didn't sit down. He never did when he wanted to assert control. Alina, he said, his voice cold and rehearsed, you're 18 now. I nodded slowly, my stomach tightening. And that means, my mother added, crossing her arms, it's time you learned responsibility. Something in her tone made my chest feel heavy. What do you mean? I asked quietly. My father looked at me like I was a stranger. It means, he said, you have 1 week to move out. The words didn't register at first. A week, I repeated. Yes, my mother snapped. We've done enough for you, enough. The word echoed in my head like a cruel joke. I had raised their son, I had cleaned their house. I had worked part-time jobs since I was 15 just to buy my own clothes. But somehow they had done enough. I don't have anywhere to go, I said, my voice barely holding together. That's not our problem, my father replied, and just like that I realized something I had been avoiding my entire life. I was never meant to stay. That night I sat on the cold basement floor, surrounded by the few things I could call mine, a duffel bag, some old books, and a locked metal box my grandmother had given me before she passed away. I hadn't opened it in years, not since the day she died. Back then, I didn't understand why she pressed it into my hands so urgently, why her voice trembled when she said, "Don't let them take everything from you, Alina." At the time, I thought she was just emotional. Now I wasn't so sure. With shaking hands, I pulled the box closer. The key was still taped underneath, just like she had shown me. I hesitated because something deep inside me knew whatever was inside that box was going to change everything. When I opened it, the first thing I saw was a stack of documents. Old, official, carefully preserved, my name was on them. That alone made my heart start racing. I flipped through the pages, my breath growing uneven as the truth slowly unfolded in front of me. Legal ownership forms, property transfer records. A signature I recognized instantly, my grandmother's, and then the address. I froze, because the address listed on the documents was the house I was sitting in. At first I thought it had to be a mistake, it didn't make sense. This was my parents' house, it always had been, wasn't it? But the more I read, the clearer it became. Years ago, before she passed away, my grandmother had transferred full ownership of the house to me, not to my father, not to my mother. To me, my hands started shaking so badly I had to put the papers down. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was something much bigger, something they had hidden from me, something they had stolen. Suddenly, memories started replaying in my mind, arguments between my father and grandmother, whispers that stopped when I entered the room, the way my mother always avoided talking about the house. And the way my grandmother looked at me like she was trying to warn me. They didn't just neglect me, I whispered to myself. They lied. That night, something inside me changed. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel powerless. I felt something else, something stronger, something dangerous. I felt angry, and for the first time, I didn't smile. Instead, I started planning, because if there was one thing I understood now, it was this. They thought they were throwing me out. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was weak. They had no idea they were about to lose everything. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I sat on the basement floor with the documents spread out in front of me, reading every line over and over again as if they might disappear if I looked away. Alina Carter, that name was printed clearly across every legal page. Owner. Not tenant, not dependent, not daughter. Owner. By morning my hands had stopped shaking, not because I felt safe, but because I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. People like my parents didn't respond to truth, they responded to power. And right now, they still believed they had all of it, so I did what I had been trained to do my entire life. I played along. At breakfast, my mother barely looked at me. She was scrolling through her phone, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. My father sat across from her, reading the newspaper with the same cold indifference he always carried. It was surreal. As if telling your daughter to leave her home was just another normal conversation. "You have 6 days left," my father said without looking up. 6 days, I nodded quietly. "Okay." That one word made my mother glance at me. Just for a second, there was something in her expression, confusion, because this wasn't the reaction she expected. No begging, no crying, no desperate attempt to stay, just acceptance. "Good," she said, recovering quickly. "That's mature of you, mature." The irony almost made me laugh, but I didn't. I just stood up, grabbed my bag and said, "I'll start packing today." And then I walked away. The moment I reached the basement, my expression changed completely. The quiet, obedient daughter disappeared, and in her place was someone else, someone who finally understood the game. The first thing I did was take pictures of every document, every page, every signature, every detail. I backed them up twice, once on my phone and once on a cloud account they didn't know existed. Because something told me this wasn't going to be simple, then I did something I had never done before. I searched for a lawyer. It felt strange typing those words into my phone, like stepping into a world that was never meant for me. But if there was one thing my parents had taught me, it was that people with power didn't fight fair. And I wasn't going to lose, not when the truth was finally on my side. By noon, I had found someone. A name kept appearing in every search result. Daniel Hayes, a property and inheritance lawyer, sharp reputation, expensive, and known for one thing above all else he didn't lose. I hesitated before calling. Because this was the point of no return. Once I involved a lawyer, everything would change, but then I remembered my father's voice. "You have 1 week to move out." I pressed dial. The call lasted less than 5 minutes. But it changed everything. "Bring everything you have," Daniel said calmly. "Every document, every detail, and don't tell anyone." His tone wasn't emotional, it was precise, controlled. Like he had already seen cases like mine before. "Am I in trouble?" I asked quietly. There was a pause on the line, and then he said something I would never forget. "No, Alina." Another pause. "You've been robbed." Those words hit harder than anything my parents had ever said to me, because deep down I already knew they were true. We scheduled a meeting for the next day, and just like that, I had a plan. But plans only work if no one suspects them. So for the next 2 days, I became exactly who my parents thought I was. I packed my things slowly, carefully, making sure they could see it, boxes stacked near the stairs. Clothes folded into bags, old books sorted into piles. I even started applying for cheap apartments, on purpose, loudly so my mother could overhear. "Oh my God, this place is so small," I said one afternoon, scrolling through listings at the kitchen table. My mother glanced over, a faint smirk on her lips. "Well," she said casually, "that's what happens when you don't plan your future properly." I nodded. "Yeah, I guess you're right." That was the moment she relaxed. I saw it in her shoulders. In the way she leaned back into her chair. Satisfied, because in her mind I had already lost, but what she didn't know was that every move I made was calculated. The next day I met Daniel. His office was nothing like I expected. No flashy decorations, no intimidating atmosphere, just clean lines, quiet lighting, and shelves filled with files. He didn't smile when I walked in, he didn't try to comfort me. He just gestured to the chair across from his desk and said, "Show me." So I did. I handed over the documents with steady hands, but inside my heart was racing, because this was it. This was the moment the truth would either stand or fall apart. Daniel didn't rush. He read every page carefully, silently, occasionally adjusting his glasses, occasionally flipping back to recheck a detail. The room felt heavier with every second. Finally, after what felt like hours, he closed the folder and looked directly at me. "This house," he said calmly, "legally belongs to you." The words didn't feel real. Even though I had read them myself, hearing them out loud made it different, stronger, final. "But," he continued, "that's only part of the story." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" He leaned back slightly. "Your parents have been living in that property for years, correct?" I nodded. "And paying no rent to you." Another nod. "And never informing you of your ownership." I swallowed. "Yes." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "That's not just unethical," he said. "It could be considered fraud." The word hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Fraud. My parents weren't just cruel, they were criminals. "And if we push this," Daniel continued, his voice calm but sharp, "you don't just reclaim your house." He paused. "You can take everything they've gained from it. Everything." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about staying in the house anymore. This was about justice, real justice. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Nothing yet." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto mine. "Let them think you're leaving." A slow, controlled silence filled the room. Pack your things, follow their rules, give them no reason to panic. I nodded slowly. And then, Daniel's lips curved just slightly, not a smile, something sharper. On the final day, he said, we remind them who the house belongs to. A chill ran down my spine because suddenly I could see it, the moment, the shock, the look on their faces when everything they believed collapsed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. I was waiting for them. The final day arrived quietly, too quietly. There was no storm, no dramatic tension in the air, no warning that everything was about to fall apart, just silence. I woke up earlier than usual. The basement felt different that morning. Empty, not because my things were gone, there were still a few boxes left, but because something inside me had already moved on. The girl who had lived down here, the girl who stayed quiet, who endured everything, who kept hoping for love, she was gone. In her place was someone who understood exactly what this day meant. I checked my phone. One message from Daniel, be ready, I'll arrive at 11:30. 11:30, that gave me just under 4 hours. 4 hours to play my role one last time. Upstairs I could already hear movement. Cabinets opening, dishes clinking, my mother humming softly like it was just another ordinary morning. I walked up slowly, carrying a small box in my hands. When I entered the kitchen, both of them were there. My father sat at the table, drinking coffee. My mother stood near the counter, slicing fruit. Neither of them said anything at first. Then my father looked up. Big day, he said flatly. I nodded. Yeah. My mother glanced at the box in my hands. Make sure you don't leave anything behind, she said. We're turning the basement into a home office. Of course you are. I forced a small smile. I won't, and just like that they went back to their routine as if I had already disappeared. The next few hours passed slowly, painfully slowly. I moved boxes, cleaned the small space I had lived in. Folded the last of my clothes, but the entire time I was watching the clock. 10:15, 10:47, 11:02, every second felt heavier than the last. Around 11:10 my mother came downstairs. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You're almost done, she asked. Yeah, I said. She nodded, scanning the room. You know, she said casually, this is probably for the best. I didn't respond. You were never really independent here, she continued. Maybe this will force you to grow up. For a moment, just a moment, the old version of me almost answered, almost defended herself. Almost asked why nothing I ever did was enough, but I stopped myself because this wasn't the time for emotions. This was the time for truth. I guess we'll see, I said calmly. She looked at me for a second longer than usual. Like she was trying to figure something out, but then she shrugged. Good luck, Alina, she said, and walked away. 11:27, my heart started pounding. This was it. I carried my last box upstairs, placed it near the front door. My father stood nearby, checking his watch. You're right here, he asked. Something like that, I said. He nodded once. Good, no emotion, no hesitation, no regret, just done. 11:30, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. For a split second, no one moved, then my father frowned. I'll get it. He walked toward the door, slightly irritated, probably expecting a delivery or maybe a neighbor. He opened it. And froze. From where I stood, I couldn't see Daniel yet, but I could see my father's expression change. Confusion, then tension, then something sharper. Yes, my father said. A calm voice answered. Good morning. I'm here to speak with Alina Carter. My father's body stiffened. Slowly, he turned his head and looked at me. That was the moment everything shifted. I didn't know you were expecting someone, he said. I met his gaze, calm, steady. I was silence, then I walked forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I didn't stop. When I reached the door, I finally saw Daniel. Sharp suit, calm posture, eyes that missed nothing. He gave me a small nod. And then he stepped inside. I believe this won't take long, he said. My mother had come into the hallway now, her expression already tense. What is this? She demanded. Daniel didn't look at her. Not yet. Instead, he opened his briefcase. Pulled out a folder and handed it to my father. You may want to read that, he said calmly. My father took the folder slowly, skeptically, and then he opened it. At first, nothing happened, just silence. His eyes moved across the page. Once, then again, and then everything changed. His face went pale. What is this? He said, his voice suddenly tight. Daniel finally looked at him. That, he said, is proof of ownership. My mother stepped closer. What are you talking about? My father didn't answer, because he was still reading, still trying to understand, still trying to find a way this wasn't real. It says, he started, his voice shaking slightly, it says this house. He looked up at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Belongs to you? Silence, heavy, crushing, unavoidable. Yes, I said, one word, that was all it took. My mother laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. That's ridiculous, she said. This is our house. Daniel closed his briefcase calmly. No, he said. He looked directly at her. It isn't. The room felt like it was collapsing in on itself. There must be some mistake, my mother said quickly. We've lived here for years, yes, Daniel interrupted, without paying the legal owner. Another silence, this one heavier than the last. That's not possible, my father said, but his voice didn't sound convincing anymore. Because deep down he already knew, he remembered my grandmother, the arguments, the signatures, the truth he thought would stay buried forever. She was 18 when ownership transferred, Daniel continued calmly. She was never informed. My mother turned to me. You knew about this? She demanded. I held her gaze. I do now, her expression twisted. You're doing this on purpose, she said. After everything we've done for you, I almost laughed. But I didn't, because this wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about facts. And what exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because for the first time there was no version of reality she could twist, Daniel stepped forward slightly. Effective immediately, he said, Elena Carter is reclaiming full control of this property. My father shook his head. No. No, you can't just, we can, Daniel said calmly. And we are. The air in the room shifted completely, because now they understood this wasn't a discussion, this was the end. You have two options, Daniel continued. Leave voluntarily, he paused, or we proceed legally. My mother stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as a daughter, but as something else, something she couldn't control anymore. You would throw us out, she whispered. I didn't answer immediately because this was the moment everything came full circle, the moment they would finally feel what they had done to me. You gave me 1 week, I said softly. Silence. I'm giving you the same. For a long time no one spoke. The air in the house felt different now, heavier, colder, like something invisible had finally cracked and there was no way to put it back together. My mother was the first to move. She took a step back, her hand gripping the edge of the table like she needed something to hold on to. This is insane, she whispered. This is insane. My father didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at the documents in his hands like they might suddenly change, like reality itself might correct the situation in his favor, but it didn't. Say something, my mother snapped at him, her voice trembling now. Fix this. For years that's what he had done, controlled everything, decided everything, silenced everything, but not this time, because this time the truth didn't belong to him. There's nothing to fix, he said quietly. It was the first honest thing I had ever heard him say. My mother turned to me again, her eyes sharp, desperate. You planned this, she said. You waited. I met her gaze without hesitation. No, I said calmly. You just never thought I'd find out. That hit harder than anything else. I saw it in her face because she knew it was true. They never expected me to question anything, never expected me to look deeper, never expected me to fight back, and that was their biggest mistake. What do you want? My father asked suddenly. His voice was different now, lower, controlled, but underneath it there was something new, fear. I took a slow breath. For so many years I had imagined this moment differently. I thought I would be angry, loud, explosive, but standing there I felt something else. Clarity. I want what's mine, I said. He nodded slowly, and after that, I paused. Because that question mattered more than anything else. What happens after revenge? I looked around the house. The walls, the furniture, the space that had held so many memories, most of them painful. This house, I said quietly, was never a home. Silence. So I'm not taking it back to live in it, I continued. I'm taking it back because it was stolen. My mother's expression shifted again, confusion this time. Then what are you going to do with it? She asked. I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in front of her. I haven't decided yet, I said, but whatever I choose, I paused. You won't be part of it. That was the moment she broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Her shoulders dropped, her expression faded, because she finally understood something she had never believed possible. She had lost control. Completely. You're really doing this, she whispered. Yes, I said, and this time there was no hesitation, no doubt, just truth. The next few days passed in a blur. They didn't fight it, not legally. Not after Daniel made it very clear how far this could go. Fraud charges, financial recovery, public records, they had too much to lose, so they packed, slowly, quietly, just like I had. And for the first time they understood what it felt like, to not belong, to not be wanted, to be told this isn't your place anymore. I didn't watch them leave. I stayed upstairs, standing near the window, not out of fear. But because I didn't need to see it, I had already seen enough. When the front door finally closed, the silence that followed felt different, not empty, free. I walked through the house slowly, room by room, not as a victim, but as someone who had finally taken something back, not just a house, but her power. A few days later, I made my decision. I sold the house. Every memory in it was tied to something I didn't want to carry anymore. And holding on to it would have meant holding on to them. I refused to do that. Instead, I used the money to start over. A new place, a new life, a new version of myself, not the girl who stayed silent. But the woman who finally understood her worth, because the truth is, this was never really about the house. It was about something much bigger. It was about realizing that the people who are supposed to protect you don't always do. And when they don't, you have a choice. You can stay quiet or you can stand up, even if it takes years, even if it hurts, even if it means losing everything you thought was yours. Because sometimes losing everything is the only way to finally gain yourself. My name is Alina Carter. I was 27 years old when I took my life back, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: the truth doesn't need permission. It just needs the right moment to be revealed, and when it is, everything changes. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Real Life Revenge series for more powerful, emotional stories just like this.